A very good morning to you all. Welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
In fact, to be specific, it's a beautiful Friday morning from here in Lagos. I'm Kayode Kikyodo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Well, we know that that right there is a real source of joy. I'm talking about this one now because, I mean, we understand that every May in the Northeast, there's this party, you know, which they celebrate the release of about 100 girls from captivity. But now, who knows, there could be a bigger party because now the students who were kidnapped in what was eventually popularly known as the Chibok girls, about 276 of them. But now that school right there is back to life. They're able to get back there and write the exams. And one of the important narratives here that I want you to note is that remember, the ideology of the terrorists was to ensure that they, you know, keep chipping away at the values, you know, getting to school, studying, their way of life, their lifestyle. And once they're able to affect that, they've scored some sort of victory. But right there, looking at that sends a huge message to a lot of people who, hopefully so too, those who may have internalized or left with that impression that it may not just be worth it, it could be a lot risky. Look, we're already talking about millions of children who are out of school, and this didn't make it any easier for the parents and government, I might add, in ensuring that they get students back to school and putting all that money, and ensuring that SUBEB, okay, we'll have challenges with that, and ensuring that at least they function to a large extent. So seeing that, we're hoping that they will build on that has come to stay, improve on the security situation there in the Northeast and generally in the country as well, and ensure that that becomes the new normal.
Well, yeah.
Or continuing in this state. Actually, very good to see, really.
Absolutely. I mean, make no mistake, this is a result of a lot of work. A lot of work. In fact, they wrote these examinations under security watch. I mean, there were security agents present all around just to ensure that, of course, this stays. And I need to say that there are two theaters where this war is being fought. There's the one you fight, you know, right there in Sambisa Forest, you know, in the theater of war, pretty much. And then there's the media one. And I think these are the kind of narratives that we love to see. This sends a message that, yes, we still have some measure of way to go, but we're making gains. And I think it's important to send this kind of message out there, not just for the people of Chibok, but for Nigerians, for the international community. I mean, a lot of people celebrated this. I mean, the last time we saw something like this, it didn't end well, 6 years ago, when those students were writing this examination, actually, interestingly. They were writing senior secondary school examinations, and it went terrible, 276, just about 100 of them released. We don't know what became of the remaining. So I'm glad that this is coming out right now. It sends a message of hope, message that, you know what, if we keep at it, if we put all our hands on deck, then we can achieve a lot. I know that it might be challenging for the students, really. Imagine having to write examinations and there are soldiers all around you. For the teachers also, it might be challenging because there might be that fear of what can happen. And that also for the invigilators, the examination, you know, body conducting this exam, it might be a lot of challenge. But I'm glad that regardless of the fears, of the possibility of things happening, they're saying, no, this is our place, this is our town, we're going to protect it. We're going to ensure that education, which has been badly hit in the northeastern part of the country, is brought back.
Yep. And this happened 6 years ago. I'm trying to fight back the thoughts of the trauma that the parents must have gone through then, which some of them could still be going through now, seeing that some of their own children are not back. But this kind of cheering news is something that is not just worthy to be joyful over, but it's, might I add, guys, that it's also one of those things that you say, okay, when the president said, let's package our good news. This is perhaps one of those things that, you know, government has been able to do. Yes, but most certainly with a lot of cooperation. The military played a major role, and that thus should be applauded. The teachers themselves, you go to work, you're not sure whether or not you're going to come back. except for the assurance that, okay, the military is there. The teachers, you remember one of them was alluding to the fact that they did a tremendous job protecting them there. And then the students who had the courage to sit through the classes for the number of years that they had to sit before they got to the point that they could write WAEC. I'm pretty sure that it's not something that happened only when they were writing examinations. They must have been going to school themselves under similar security challenges. But here we are now. Other security protection, beg your pardon. But here we are now. Will we be able to sustain that trend? Or is there anything being done to ensure that the security situation in that area persists permanently, so we don't have just these happenstances, but it is something that, as Chamberlain said, is a new normal, or that is just permanent, that we don't ever have to have this fear again? That's our prayer.
Yeah, and we're hoping that, yes, it is indeed a very good one. And they changed too. They're also improving. It's now no longer a single-sex, single-gender school. Yeah. So the boys are now attending that school as well. Good to see. So those changes are all welcome. But let's go ahead and take a look at what and how are the dailies reflecting issues today. We'll start with Leadership Friday today. And look at what they go with today. Don't give Forex for food, fertilizer. PMB orders CBN. Says we averted food crisis amid COVID-19 pandemic. Well, I know that they thought, okay, we're not completely out of the pandemic, but, and you know, you just might begin to feel the effects, 2 quarters, and then, when you use examples that people can relate to faster, the message tends to sink a lot better. Football. Because some of the clubs are waiting for their annual revenue, see the audit reports, so they can know how much do they really have, so they know how do they play in the transfer market. So that's what they say, and then who knows? The lessons from everything. So if you try to go with that mindset, just learn what are the principles behind some of these things that happen. It could take you a lot further than you never know, really.
I didn't see that coming, really.
Neither did I.
Football and food.
No, I didn't see it coming too.
To play on food.
Double F. Remember that?
Okay.
Double F. It could always work. So, we averted food crisis amid COVID-19 pandemic. Yeah. Approves 8.9 billion naira hazard allowance for health workers. Resident doctors suspend nationwide strike. Northern governors meet on pandemic reintegration of Amadure. And then 10% of coronavirus positive cases are children. Subscribe to the minister. Manufacturers donate.
That's a big one, gentlemen. Yeah. And that should be a cause for a bit of concern. If 10% of the numbers today are of children, then how are we planning to ensure that, just as the Minister of Education said, when the cameras are not there, what's happening?
Well, then first of all, see the story in context and see what age range are these children, so you clearly know.
You actually mentioned under 18,
how to,
between 12 and 18.
Well, I like them to go in and read the daily. Let's not discourage people from reading the paper. That's why they publish it in the first place.
Okay.
So manufacturers donate 8 billion naira cash, 300 million naira palliatives. So that is a big one on the front page of Leadership today.
Oh, I'm taking a look at the front page of a Daily Trust, and I'm spoiled for choice. But let me begin with the lead story. Nigerians groan as food prices rise. I'm sure that's a story well familiar with. It's not something you're being told. It's something you experience, something you can write about and tell. You see, riders, we can't afford 3 meals a day. It's coming from citizens. Yeah. So it's no more 111, as they say. It's maybe now 010011.
3 times a day.
You said?
Yeah, I was thinking.
Okay. Better.
Thinking aloud.
Okay.
Hopefully it wasn't loud enough.
And there seems to be some message of hope coming from the Minister of Agriculture saying prices of food coming down. So go to the market now and find out just how fast that is happening. We won't give a cover for food fertilizer importation. It's coming from President Buhari. He has been consistent you know, with this statement, and yet again he's saying, well, not now, maybe not never. We find out more details on page 5. It's a lot, really.
It's a lot. Because, I mean, if you monitored the news yesterday, you'd also follow what the DG of NISA said, the Hydrological, you know, Service of Society of Nigeria, saying that we face a similar...
Don't give out too much.
Oh, okay.
Don't give out too much.
Okay. I'm trying not to.
I know that feeling.
But you said it's a lot, so I just wanted to.
But you know, there are pictures on the front page.
It's not for them to go and read, right?
You know, and that is...
Maybe I'm just being generous this morning.
Yeah.
No, that's not being generous, because I don't think the editors or the publishers will like that generosity.
Oh, goodness me.
Well,
They want to go and read the daily.
I want to be generous on my program. Come on, guys.
Yeah, but you know,
Everyone has his own...
Let me be generous with some stories for you this morning. You see, rather than the big pictures, you might see some big pictures on the front page, but let me give you the explanation. Customs intercept Dubai-bound passenger with 2,886 ATM cards. Yeah, so I'm just trying to piece that together. 2,886 ATM cards. So you see those pictures, right? The one on the top right shows those ATM cards.
so that generosity, are they all his own?
You know,
But from that generosity we showed previously?
This is not Nigeria bound. This is Dubai bound.
Yeah.
So that
He's leaving from,
generosity
where is he leaving from?
outside Nigeria.
No, he hasn't gotten there yet.
Outside Nigeria.
No, he hasn't gotten. Has he gotten outside Nigeria?
well,
No.
well, he was
Customs
accosted
intercepted him.
in Nigeria.
In other words, it's not supposed to go out. Some people wanted to be generous to people outside Nigeria.
In fact, let me give you more. Let me be even
So
more
now you
generous
wanna be
about this
generous.
story. In fact, the ATM cards were packed inside a pack of noodles.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Food.
Well, yeah. So, really quite shocking story, I must tell you. But you find out more details on page 7. How did this happen? I mean,
I think some banks, some people will always advise you, once your card is expired, destroy it.
we don't even know if these cards are new cards, are unexpired, are stolen.
Things could happen even with the ones that expired, I can tell you that for free.
Okay. I mean, you learned that this morning. Speaking
I'm
of
not gonna be
generosity.
generous.
you
No,
know.
I'm not going to be generous and say a lot more than that.
You know, a couple of other stories. There's FG flags of 60 billion naira MSME survival fund. Yeah, speaking of generosity. But you know, this is more of a responsibility, really. It's on page 16 in case you're looking to access that fund. Find more details on page 16. A couple of other stories, but let's leave it there for Daily Trust.
We're still talking about food. Now how's that for generosity? New Telegraph is also leading the paper today with that one. Buhari governor's ministers parley over rising cost of food items. That's it right there. And the president is saying how we averted food crisis despite COVID-19. Gambari price crash imminent. Now, well, maybe the New Telegraph is a little more generous. 12 farmers drown, oh my God, in Niger. Now, this is definitely not something good to see. And CBN to deny food, fertilizers, importers, forex. The story you'll find on pages 3 and 7 of New Telegraph this morning. I think this has to do with, maybe it has to do with flooding in that state, but then you want to find out what all of that is about on the inside pages. Right under the pictures you see there of the president and vice president having conversations with the president of the AFDB. Governorship election, INEC redeploys 5 Rex 3 national commissioners to Edo. APC, PDP bicker over fake PVCs and vote buying. CJN to judges, don't yield to blackmail on petitions. The story you'll find on page 2. At above the nameplate, UK court orders PNID to pay Nigeria £1.5 million legal cost.
You like to see that?
It is very generous of the court.
As if it's about to drop somewhere.
I am, come on, it's money. If you convert that, it will help with the food crisis. Malami, in the story, says, we're pleased with the judgment. Found the details on page 4 of the paper this morning. Of course, a number of other stories there. Resident doctors suspend strike to review action in 2 weeks. Sex for grade. Imo Varsity suspends 2 lecturers in sex video. That story is on page 7 of the paper this morning.
Take a look at Vanguard next. Over 5,100 card readers burnt in Ondo INEC fire. Destroyed card readers meant for October poll. Deja vu, right? So there you go. You just wonder what motives. What wouldn't they do? We've seen this scenario before, even when the last election was going on. I think it was a quite bump state, but eventually it didn't affect much as it went on. These elections will probably go on.
Just two months? Sorry, a month away actually.
So hopefully they have some time to, bounce back, if I could use that word. And then still talking about INEC. This one is right at the bottom strip, beneath that picture you see in the middle there. Edo INEC deploys 5 additional recs, 3 national commissioners, 13,000 staff. APC, PDP clash over plot to clone by PVCs. Above Benin seeks protection for core members, and rightly so too. And so, well, there are just so many. I'll let you go for that, Mr. and Mrs. But electronic voting, only way to credible elections, ascribed to Jonathan. Take a look at the back page of Vanguard. FIFA 21. Messi beats Ronaldo again. Yeah, it was all over the social media yesterday, taking a look at the rankings, and you're like, what? How could he?
But hey, I mean, in terms of pace and some other things and physical strength, Ronaldo did well,
So, well, that's FIFA 21 right there. So, yeah, and Moses is, oh, wow, this could be tongue twisting. That's Victor Moses, actually. So, Moses' Chelsea future in doubt. Oh boy.
Trying to say that 5 times.
Instead of jump into that, gosh, you could just find yourself crashing. Igalo retains jersey number 25 for new season. Some time ago, you thought he was going back to China, and now he's retaining this. So that's good to see, and see how he also equally fits into that team. So
yeah.
It's going to be an interesting football season all round, I guess, or maybe for the 2 leagues that you had lots of fans back home here. So that's Vanguard today.
Well, next up is Nigerian Tribune. Ondo INEC office in fire, rather on fire, pardon me. You see riders, container housing smart card readers burned, 5,100 units affected. And that picture shows the scene of a fire incident at the INEC office in Akure yesterday. The fire was said to have started at, check the Nigerian Tribune for more details. It's on page 26. And you see, fire share should be ignored. Olujimi tells Makinde. Oyo governor will continue with reconciliation process. That's credited to his aide. Apparently there's this, back and forth. But it's on page 26. And there's this one we don't like to see or hear about, or like for it to happen. Ondoguba, 1 killed, scores injured as political thugs clash.
Oh, that's great.
You see, two PDP lawmakers shot out of assembly. It's on page 26. There's always...
It's one of those things that the IGP had been talking about, that thugs were being armed by political parties.
And you expect we should have moved, away from this. This is so 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but sadly, that's where we still are at this moment. A couple of other stories, really. Customs intercept suspect with almost 3,000 ATM cards. Bandits strike in Abuja, abduct residents. You see, we rescued 5 victims on the trail of remaining 5. That's the police. It's on page 2. And that UK court's PNID judgment also on the front page, £1.5 million to Nigeria. That's how much PNID should pay for legal costs. But let me show you sports page. Racism won't worry Osimhen in Italy. That's coming from Raw. He's scored 2 hat-tricks now, back-to-back. Of course, they were pre-season matches, but those goals were quite interesting, and I think they'll just give you a peek.
Did he tell Raw that?
I guess. Oh, I mean, Nigerian players generally are quite resilient. So, I mean, whatever the case is, you're there to play football. So do your best, and just
Well, we'll join the global movement to stamp that out.
Yeah.
Anywhere it rears its ugly head,
Yeah, and then you see, face Tyson land in court. Joshua warned. That's why you should pick a copy of the Nigerian Tribune just to find out what that means. We'll leave you there for the Nigerian Tribune.
The Daily Times newspaper leads with this one. Well, if you look at the front page of the paper this morning, you'll see a picture that was used, Cowdy reviewed on another paper yesterday. But it's something that the Daily Times finds very, very interesting. The struggle for right of way right there in Abuja. It's a car, or cows, and a truck pusher. You see that there. The lead story, outrage over alleged violation of rights and crackdown on protests. Find that on page 2 of the paper today. And what we had a conversation about earlier, SSC examinations, why conduct exams in Chibok schools after 6 years. The story is on page 2. Kaduna crisis. Kaduna warring parties agree to ceasefire at NCPC summit. Find the story on page 4. And fuel subsidy, Nigeria will earn 1 trillion naira yearly from fuel subsidy removal. That story is also on page 4. The editorial of the Daily Times newspaper this morning is on Is UCH Ibadan now a killing field? Find what that is all about on page 12 of the paper this morning.
Okay, take a look at The Guardian next. Nigeria's cocoa production falls as Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire enjoy boom. Production falls from 300,000 to 245,000 metric tons. Low budgets, poor grading, others identified as factors. Researchers blames scrapping of cocoa boards. So you see, and there's an extension to that, not just for the cocoa boards, but hopefully we might have time to touch on that as we progress this morning. Look at this at the bottom strip. Riverine areas north may pay more for petrol as daily consumption slumps. So you might want to see, okay, what is that about now? And then, what's that? Well, those are some of the key ones you find. No spoonerisms this time, so safe landing. That's The Guardian today.
Well, let's end with Nigerian News Direct. Nigeria to save 1 trillion naira annually. That's, of course, concerning regulation. To create massive jobs. And there's this one right just at the bottom of the front page. NCC raises alarm over hike in phishing scams and other e-frauds. By the way, phishing as in PHI. You might want to watch out for that, especially now that almost everybody is online. Please watch out for e-frauds and phishing scams. Controversy trails fire outbreak at Ondo INEC office concerning Ondo 2020. Just, you find a lot of comments, conspiracy theories right there. A lot of people responded.
All right, so there you go. That wraps it up. We'll look at some of the dailies here today. We will be back in just a moment. Just hold on a minute.
Nigeria currently ranks at number 93 out of 117 in the World Global Food Index. A disappointing score for a largely agrarian society. Agriculture alone accounts for over 40% of the employment in Nigeria. It's a sector in dire need of government support, considering it used to account for more than 70% of the country's GDP at independence. Now it contributes just over 20%. The Buhari administration in March of 2018 set up the National Food Security Council, specifically to ensure food security in the country. The president believes the council is delivering on its mandate.
In the last 5 years, we have recorded notable achievements despite the decline in GDP by 6.1% in second quarter of 2020. As a direct result of coronavirus, the agricultural sector continued to grow because of government's targeted agricultural policies. We have been blessed by God with 6 successive rainy seasons, ensuring good harvest since 2015. The nation thanks our farmers for rising to the occasion and answering our national call.
The council is also taking credit for the reduction in the cost of food over the months and wants Nigerians to expect high output this harvest season. Its deputy chairman, the governor of Kebbi State, Atiku Bagudu, says the country has achieved self-sufficiency in many crops.
Harvest has commenced in some parts of the country in respect of some crops, and because of that, the prices have begun to respond to harvest by beginning to come down. Maize was never on the importation ban list. What CBN did in order to support domestic maize production was to restrict the sale of foreign exchange for maize importation. And but maize is not a banned commodity yet.
President Buhari has instructed the central bank not to issue a kobo of the country's reserves for the importation of food items and fertilizer. He insists that the focus should be on empowering local producers and farmers. That way, the government will ensure food security while fixing the unemployment rate. From the State House in Abuja, Kayla Megwa, Channels Television News.
All right, welcome back. Well, yes, that is what we're focusing on today. So, two gentlemen joining us to take a look at that particular policy. Garba Shehu, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, as well as Dr. Ahmed Adamu, who is a Senior Lecturer of the Economics Department, Nile University, Abuja, joining us from our studios in Abuja. Mr. Shehu, let me start with you. Well, perhaps you might have heard that though they say, yes, it's good to pay attention to the impending or would-be food crisis, and I'm sure we avert it, but the steps we're taking, for instance, there are those who think that CBN policies shouldn't be imposed by a political authority. They have a problem with that particular one. They think that pronouncement by the president qualifies as such and should not actually have been.
Well, certainly I'm not an expert in these matters, but what I know is that this central bank is the Central Bank of Nigeria, and the Central Bank of Nigeria must run its affairs in the best interest of the country that owns it, which is Nigeria. And I'm not sure anywhere in the world there is a central bank that is so independent that it will operate like a foreign ownership. So I think that Nigerians must give consideration to the fact that the president's directive to the Central Bank of Nigeria is driven by nothing other than a patriotic motive to promote what we grow at home, so that we are not enslaved by foreign food supplies.
Well, we know that this is a policy that the president has been talking about for a while, but could you give us the thinking behind this particular directive?
Well, you look at lately, there has been much discussion on the issue of maize to support poultry farming. I believe that the Central Bank of Nigeria has authorized some measure of importation in order to ease the crunch in the market. Of course, this has been stopped by the orders of the central bank itself. But you also saw that there had been opposition to the importation by Rice Growers Association. I mean, the growers of corn, Maize Growers Association of Nigeria. So it would appear that there was no unanimity behind that exercise. And so therefore here we are. The president has clearly stated that there is no more case for government trading. I mean, all earnings from that is domiciled in the central bank to be used for importation of food. Those Nigerians with the appetite for foreign foods, with their independent sources of foreign exchange, they can use their money to bring in whatever they want, so long as those things are not outlawed.
Let's turn to Dr. Ahmed now. Good policy, you think?
Well, I think the question of whether it is a good policy or not, I think the timing is very important. I believe this decision is coming at a very wrong time, and at a time when we are not matured, when our agricultural sector is not matured for this kind of measure. If you look at the already existing inflation we already have an increasing inflation. For you to take this kind of measure when it comes to food items, you have to look at the existing, or what sort of inflation do you have. We already have a rising inflation at hand, and within this week, the federal government has also removed the petroleum subsidy. And these are triggers for hyperinflation. So the timing is very critical. And this is happening at a time when Nigerians are not ready to actually boycott foreign food items because of their addiction or their attraction to foreign food items. And I think it's also a wrong time because we have not built the right infrastructure, and we have not supplied sufficient agricultural facilities, and we have not built the entire agricultural value chain. So these are the reasons why I say this is a wrong time for us to do that. And we are already facing insecurity. A lot of farmers have been displaced from their towns and from their farms, and they cannot produce much. So we are going to create a lot of scarcity in the country. And now you are also discouraging cheaper importation from foreign products. So the only option most people will have is to tap into the comparative advantage from other countries. And that's how we have an open economy between countries where countries that are facing crises and scarcities can leverage on other countries' comparative advantage. So we are not matured, and we have not fulfilled the conditions required for this kind of restrictions. Even though this is the prerogative of the president, it's a fiscal policy, of course, because the directives is coming from the government. And the condition is for you to do this kind of restrictions on food items at a time like this, you have to actually provide the enabling environment. You have to make sure that the local food items are available in enough quantity and of the desired quality and at a competitive price. And now we are seeing a high rise of food items, price of food items in the country. And this measure is going to increase the prices of food items further. And at a time when we just coming out from coronavirus lockdown and insecurities around the country, and you are removing fuel subsidy, and now you are denying forex to people that are importing relatively cheaper product or better products from outside the country, actually is not helpful. I believe the timing is important rather than the question of whether it is a good decision or not. And I believe the government has actually failed to protect the value of Naira. And that's why we found ourselves in this kind of difficulty, whether we need to subsidize importation by giving forex or not. If Naira has been protected, the value of Naira is actually attractive, the government would not have to worry whether who she's giving a forex or not. But the idea is now Naira is actually lost its value drastically in the hand of this government. So actually Nigerians should not be punished for the failure of the CBN and the fiscal policy makers to protect the Naira. And I believe this decision that this government is taking is actually a recipe for hyperinflation. There are 5 things that happened recently. First, we just come out from COVID-19 lockdown, insecurity around the country, and then a dollar hike. You know, we've seen the value of Naira deteriorating, meaning that you have to pay more Naira to acquire a unit of foreign currency, let's say dollar.
Right,
we also
Dr.
face insecurity. And you are now removing forex subsidy.
Yeah, you have raised a lot of issues, and we'll try to unwind them. But let's go back to Mr. Garba Shehu. Now, Dr. Damo has raised a lot of issues. He has said we fail to protect our naira, and he says Nigerians should not be punished for the failure of the government, of course, through the CBN. And he's raised several issues, really. And regarding this particular policy, he's thinking that now is not the time. And he particularly said that the conditions, the measures that were meant to have been put in place were not met before this policy came, into place. So basically, there is a need. There is a demand that the supply is not meeting. And he thinks that maybe now is the time to step back and say, well, for now, let us put this on hold. What are your thoughts?
Well, he has said so much as you suggested yourself. And at some point, one was wondering whether he was really talking about some other country, not Nigeria. It would appear that a scholar of his understanding does not know that this country had been targeted for dumping of food, rice in particular, by foreign nations. One of the neighboring countries at some point at their harbor, they had 9 ships loaded with rice. By the food culture of that country, they ate the basmati rice. Parboiled was Nigerian. 8 of the 9 ships had carried parboiled rice intended for the Nigerian market. Nigerian agriculture had been sabotaged. Poultry agriculture had been sabotaged by countries that are dumping on Nigeria. He's talking about cheap food coming from abroad because it is subsidized by foreign suppliers so that they will undermine local growth of food items. And we have succeeded in blocking that. This country has attained more than 90% food self-sufficiency. We are not, as we speak now, there's no shortage of this kind of food in the country. Yes, there is high cost of food in the country, and this can be explained. Part of this had come from the failure of dry season farming due to problems with fertilizer. The lockdown occasioned by COVID had impacted the movement not only of food items but of fertilizer and the other raw materials needed for it. In fact, of particular worry was the fact that notorious in Port Harcourt, this country's leading fertilizer producer that also supplied other raw materials that are locally sourced, was shut down for 3 to 4 months because it was racked by COVID. Staff in that organization had COVID and the place was shut down. All of these things had their own implications for the country. So to say that the timing is wrong, when is the best timing? When are we going to wait until they killed completely local food production, and then we are not able to do agriculture because a farmer who invests rice or corn or whatever it is in the country. And well, it would seem because it's foreign, cheap foreign rice or corn in the country.
Yeah, let me ask, just one moment, Mr. Chew. Let me ask Dr. Adamu, about this issue. So, well, you're talking about the timing, and of course, a number of people might agree with you, but then some also might disagree, about whether or not it's the right time or not, because as you heard him say, there is perhaps the problem of when is the right time. Okay, so here we are now. Let's kind of move on. What responsibility do you see here for states? Of course, the federal government can only, talk to, the aggregates, the businesses, perform some fiscal stuff that they can. But then the responsibility of how these things get done have to be in partnership with the states. Just yesterday, we were having that conversation. Well, we had that news report where the DG of NISA said that we'll have some challenge on our hands if we do not find a way to deal with flooding, because that can also, in a way, affect our food production. Is there anything we can do now? It's not that we didn't know that there was going to be flooding. He's been making that noise since December of last year, that we should do something to ensure that we do not have a food crisis on our hands because of the volume of rains that will happen this year. So here we are now. What do you think the states can do to forestall a food crisis occasioned by flooding?
Well, when you talk about flooding, it's a natural thing. It's natural disaster. Is beyond human control, even though we can take measures to mitigate that. But I would like to take the angle of what the government can do to mitigate the food crisis. I mentioned insecurity. For example, Katsina State, where I come from, I know that millions of people that have been displaced from their local areas, from their towns, from their farms, and they can no longer farm. And now we have drought in northeastern part of this country. So these are factors that actually I believe is a failure of government to ensure security, and that is why we are going to have food crisis. And largely, when he's asking about the right time is when the government will strategically sit down and ask itself, why do people prefer foreign food items? Why? Because consumers are rational all the time. They know why they go for foreign food items. Maybe, is it because of quality? Is it because of quantity? Is it because of price? Now, instead of you to enforce it, to force Nigerians to buying things they are not ready to buy, why wouldn't you make them become attracted, or the local products becoming attracted to the Nigerians by enhancing its quality, quantity, and ensuring there's competitive price for our local food items? So these are the things that we need to set in place before we even enforce people, because this actually is an aggressive measure, if I will say, because we live in a liberal economy where people have freedom to choose what they want to choose from. But there are other failures from the side of government that we don't want to be punished for their own failure. And so that's the number one thing we need to do. And the right time is when you provide the right subsidy and support to local producers, so that even it's going to be more lucrative for people that have the money to produce within Nigeria than to even import from outside. And we have not seen the effect of that so much. And the right time is when you build the right infrastructure and provide the modern facilities and equipment for mechanized farming. We are still at a traditional farming system. We still use our labor, we still use the hoe, we still go and use natural fertilizer. And we are still at like 30 years back. So we have not built the right infrastructures for us to say we are now discouraging importation of food items from other countries that have comparative advantage. And we are saying that we want to produce all food items we want.
Dr. Adamu, just one moment.
Maybe concentrate on the ones that we have better comparative advantage.
Yeah, but I'm asking what the responsibility of the states, I mean the state government, what can they do? If we are going to do what the federal government is talking about in the economic sustainability plan, pull 5 million people, provide 5 million jobs through agriculture, it has to be in partnership with the state governments. Are there, from where you stand, from your own observation and economically speaking now, are there plans that you can see that can make that happen, especially in partnership with the states?
Well, states have limited powers in this perspective, in this issue, because state government cannot control what is being imported. And largely we are looking at the Nigerian market entirely. But what the state government can do is to do their own part to subsidize production and to concentrate on production of what they have been endured in their state, the state where the product they have a better comparative advantage in their own state. So I believe states can actually do much more to also incentivize local production. Local production, not only the production of local items, but improving the quality of it. So state government, I believe they have limited roles here, but it's largely a central government decision to actually influence the general food market. So my idea is, instead of you to enforce whatever you want, you just won't allow the system to do it by itself. So we live in a very open economy where things happen by themselves. You don't have to come and enforce it. So that's my own idea about this issue. So the state government actually have limited roles here.
All right, let's take it back to Mr. Shehu. Well, part of the point he raised was, part of what I was thinking about when I said, look, was the thinking behind this particular directive, haven't been on it for a while. But because in addition to that, yes, consumers have mentioned that as well, the quality of local production, the cost of rice. Yes, they say, look, I mean, even today's dailies, we're talking about the lack of those boards, commodity boards, to do something about pricing, making it affordable. So what is government thinking or planning to do to ensure, first, the quality of those goods are improved, the pricing is right, such that the reasons why they go for the foreign ones will make the local ones a lot better?
We are an open market, not as irresponsibly open as some people might expect. Because there is no country, absolutely no country, that allows 100% free market without any form of regulation. And suggestions by my colleague on the panel that Nigerians are being punished for some of these regulations speaks to the language of the opposition, and I don't think that is scholarly. Now, the thing about what the government is doing is the government has a policy of maintaining strategic reserves. The reserves are not only for food security, but also for price stabilization. If prices are said to be going dangerously low, government has a duty to farmers, and it has done this in many instances, to go to the market, scoop excess grains and store them so that farmers will not regret plants and then they will be absent from their farms next year. Commodity boards are not in the contemplation of this government at the time. We are not expecting that there will be that kind of price control.
Okay, Mr. Shehu, pardon me to jump in, but we'll come back to you when we return in a moment, but we'll also see how we're going to adjust your sound and make it a little better. Please stay with us. All right, welcome back. We'll get back to Mr. Shehu in a moment, but Dr. Adamu, well, he thinks that, yes, some of those considerations, this decision wasn't taken, well, without consideration to those other factors that, other than the cases of smuggling, which worsens the scenario, makes the cost of the local ones, well, they make the smuggled ones a lot cheaper, so people can resort to that. But when you say the right time, will there ever really be a right time to take these decisions?
Yes, there is going to be a right time. It depends on the right action that the government is taking. You know, when this government came in the beginning, what they did was to close the borders, especially the land borders. And for almost 6 years now into this administration, what that resulted into was food price hike, and it seems to be on the rise again. So the economy is already heating. So what we anticipate in the future is further shrinking of the economy, and then the price is going up again and again. I believe I have this opinion and suggestion to this administration that if actually people smuggle foreign items, there must be a reason why they do that. And if they cannot pass through the road and pay for the duties, there must be a reason why they do that. And these are Nigerians, and these are people that really want to survive. And a lot of people's jobs have been shuttered down. People are no longer having their jobs. Unemployment is on the rise. And that's why you have insecurity in the border states, especially in Katsina and other neighboring local governments in the border areas. Because people that rely on the border businesses
it appears as though, Dr. Adamu,
and if people have to...
If you can hear me, now, you say that people have a reason for smuggling, but I mean, a crime is a crime. It is wrong to smuggle. So doesn't that sound as though we're trying to justify smuggling because whether you have a reason or not, it is a crime?
I'm not trying to justify the smuggling acts itself. I'm trying to illustrate or point at the justification for even the demand for the foreign item that the person is trying to smuggle into the country, because the person that is smuggling an item knows that there is a demand for that. and people will still buy these imported products. So the idea is, what sort of attraction do we have in the foreign products that we don't have in the local products? So the question is now, the right time is when you set target and say, okay, when you take rice, for example, and why people like basmati rice? Why don't they go for local rice? Because maybe local rice is not properly milled, and maybe there are some stones in it and it's not tasting very well. Then how do you improve the quality of local rice so that people will abandon the foreign rice and buy the local rice? Because local rice will still have the quality and will still have the price. So what this administration did was, they didn't build the local products. What they did was just to close the border. And people will still have that kind of preference to really want a better product. So no matter how much expensive it is, they will still want to buy the foreign products. And what they do is, now they are making prices of everything going high, and that reduces the value of people's income. Because people will still not go for the local product. So the idea is, this administration actually is largely misinformed, especially when it comes to food prices. Okay. I heard what Garba Shehu is saying, that prices are going down, which is contrary to reality. Everyone knows that food price of everything is going high, especially after the announcement of the petroleum subsidy removal now.
All right, let's get him to respond. Let's get him to respond to the issues you have raised, Dr. Adamu. You've raised quite a number of them, and it might be tricky to unpack them. But Mr. Garba Shehu, you've heard him. He raised quite a number of issues, and he talked about the quality of local rice, specifically local products. Is the government also working to develop that?
Well, let me first of all say that the issue of the border closure did not exist for 6 years. It was put in place last year, and it wasn't about rice and food only. Weapons had been smuggled into the country as small arms that are being used, to feed intercommunal crisis and banditry in the country. Drugs have been brought across the border, and the trafficking of humans and all other things. So there are so many issues that are involved. Now, to say that the cost of food item is connected to the closure of the border is absolutely wrong. And that to say that there is no, the prices aren't coming down, I think that the scholar has detached himself from the market, because we sat through the meeting of the National Food Security Council, and we had presentations by experts, people who had surveyed the markets as of yesterday in the morning of the day of the meeting. Go and check. If you check the index market, for instance, in Kano, millet had gone up to 24,000. It's down to 12, 13 now. Rice that had been 25 is now 20. Corn, maize is now 18 for the old stock, and new stock 14, 15,000 naira. So to say that there is no change in the prices is to show that one is completely detached from what is happening in the country.
Mr. Shehu, listening right now, and a number of people will be wondering if it's the same markets we all go to, because when you say prices of food has gone down, media reports, experiences of people, I'm almost certain that if we were to go on Twitter now, the realities that people are facing will be different from the data that is available to government. Is there any way we can bridge the gap between the reality and the figures?
I think that, as the Germans say, if you want to get the best of the weather, to know what is the best of the weather, open the window. My suggestion to the journalists who sit and write all of these numbers, send your correspondence to the streets, go to the markets and to find out. I didn't say that all of the prices, the changes had crashed completely. They are coming down because the harvested items are coming into the market. Prices are coming down. They will continue to go down as more and more food items are harvested. It's a seasonal thing, and we are going to see through this as well.
You know, looking at figures from the MBS, I mean, they tell a different story. You look at inflation figures, consumer price index, even food index at 15.48%. And in fact, people are predicting that it might even rise to more. Dr. Adamu says it might even become hyperinflation. So those are the figures, really. And you wonder, how does that merge with people's realities? But, you know, people are also predicting, experts, in fact, are predicting a food crisis. We listened to NISA saying the flooding is going to affect a lot of farmers, making their yields drop drastically. So it appears as though the government is saying there will not be a food crisis. But when you listen to experts, when you see the figures, and when you listen to NISA, it tells a different story entirely. So are we heading towards a food crisis?
I think that Nigerians, we should be trusting of our governments, because the people who told the Minister of Agriculture to come to Food Security Council yesterday to say that we are expecting a bumper harvest, they are Nigerians as well. They are not foreigners. And it's not as if they don't love this country. I think that there is a lot of pessimism that is driving popular discourse, and much of it imbued by politics well, opposition politics is normal, is expected in any democracy. But the level at which we are seeing these things is very alarming. My point is, I think that Nigerians should trust their own government, should trust their own people, because we are all Nigerians in the government. We are not from the moon.
Now, I want to ask you a question. Well, we heard all that the president has said, that, you know, these policies are geared towards helping to develop the local farmers' capabilities and engage the young men. Is there a plan to increase the list of food or food items on the prohibition list, on the import prohibition list?
Let me say that even maize that we discussed now is not on import prohibition list. Even rice that you mentioned is not on any import prohibition list. They are prohibited from accessing foreign exchange from the Nigerian Central Bank. If you, as a citizen of Nigeria, you have a foreign exchange from independent sources, you will come, but of course you'll be confronted with a high duty payable at the point of entry.
Now, I hear you, but I want to ask you again, is there a plan? Because if we want to discourage these products from being imported, perhaps then it would be a good idea to just outrightly place it on the prohibition list. So is there such a plan so that people can be discouraged from importing them? Let's just ban them, put them on the import prohibition list so that the market can actually go the way government intends.
Well, if our scholars will allow us, Nigerian government, we can survive on food that we produce in the country. But we are part of an ecosystem that is characterized by a reasonable and harsh criticism. We also belong to organizations such as the World Trade Organization, WTO, and sometimes you get sanctioned, you know, for some of these things that you do. But I think that the smart way of doing it, yes, there had been about 41 items that are not allowed into the country using foreign exchange from CBN, including some of the things you mentioned, poultry, toothpicks, and things like that, and tissue paper. However, and I think we're doing with that. If government considered it's necessary to add to that list, I'm sure that it is something that will be done.
Let's wind down now. But Dr. Damu, well, you heard him. Those policies are not in isolation, contrary to the widespread belief. What do you think of that?
Well, I think regarding the question he was asked about why not ban these products entirely, I think what the government is doing now is saying that we are going to increase prices of imported products, and you guys, I know you must buy these products, and now you have to now trade other things for these highly increased priced products. And so what you are doing, you are inducing inflation into the country. and you cannot ban them entirely. So this is actually the failure of the government to actually build the infrastructure so that we don't even have to bother which items are we importing or not. So the idea is the government feeling that whenever it's being criticized and think that this is an opposition, it is not. It's a reality, and we have to tell the government that this is what the government brought us to, and there are better ways we can actually do these things. And I believe the issue of border issue he mentioned, where arms and drugs are being imported through the land borders. Actually, this is also a failure of the government. If you fail to checkmate the importation of these illegal products, you should not punish other people that are also importing the legal products. So now what you are doing, you are now closing the border entirely and depriving people of benefit that the land border provides. So what you are doing now, you are reaching the rich people that can afford to import through via the sea borders. And now this administration has been shouting about agricultural policies, agricultural revolution. And we recently saw a circular from the customs saying that there are some people that are allowed to import maize into the country. And it amazed me to see under this agricultural revolution, we still import a common maize into the country. And we still import a lot of things, food items we eat.
We need to wind down. Let me just ask Mr. Gabasho. We saw a documentary by Akwa Ibom State. They were talking about Ibom deep sea ports in terms of helping the economy grow and then providing not just for Nigeria, but attracting forex. They are talking about this Ibom deep sea port. Is there any information? I think they say that they're waiting for the government to sign off on that before they can operate fully to contribute to the economy. Any information about that for us?
Well, first of all, I will say that for a doctor to say border closure, there is a partial border closure. The borders of Nigeria have not been sealed. Importation through land border, that is the issue. All seaports are open to export and import. Airports are open to export and import. And on account of this, customs revenue has shot, through the roof. It has never, even with COVID, we are doing the best any customs can do in the country. You asked about Ibom deep sea port. I hope that if it is an issue of approval, it will be done because it is a national development issue. I've not been briefed about this. I'm not in a position to say what is the status of that project.
All right, we thank both of you, Mr. Gabasho, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, as well as Dr. Ahmed Adamu, a Senior Lecturer at Now University, Abuja. Thank you both for talking to us today. All right.
Well, right now, the next thing of concern is what we encountered on the front page of the dailies yesterday was World Suicide Prevention Day. And information that's out there says that Nigeria has the highest suicidal rate in Nigeria. And that is really, really something that gives a lot of people concern. To discuss this and possible solutions, Dr. Olayinka Atilola joins us this morning. He's head of Department of Psychiatry, LASUCOM, and LASUTH in Ikeja. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's amazing that these figures are coming out, and I'm wondering, how does your industry receive and handle these kind of issues?
Well, thank you very much. When it comes to suicide, one of the first things I always want to say is that suicide is not just a single event. It can be seen as a process. So what I mean by that is that within the community, you have a spectrum of people who, starting from people that for reasons of some frustrations or the other are wishing to die. And we have another spectrum who are contemplating suicide, but they don't have any plan towards it. We have those who are not only contemplating, but they have a plan. And we have those who have actually engaged in a suicidal behavior. So this spectrum, what we tend to see in the hospital, unfortunately, are people who have already done a suicidal act, who were brought to the hospital for the care of the physical injuries or the physical manifestation of the suicidal act, during which time a psychiatrist is called to come and talk to the individual as part of the management.
Okay, but pardon me to button on this one. When do you say those who have carried out suicidal acts? Because what registers with a lot of people when they think about suicidal act, or those who may have tried it, is somebody hanging or standing somewhere trying to just jump off. Not many actually, because when we see these figures, chances are that we could gloss over them. But could you just tell us, what are these range of suicidal acts that are common that you've seen and handled?
Yes, that is what I was trying to explain, that it's a spectrum. And the reason why I'm talking about that spectrum is so that we can understand the enormity of the problem. So whenever the figures are released that this is the number of people that engage in suicidal acts in a country in a year, that represents a tip of the iceberg, in the sense that there's a large number of people who fall under the lower spectrum, which I've mentioned before, those who are contemplating the act and who have a plan for it. Somebody standing by the railings of a bridge has not only contemplated the act, is already having a plan, because that's why he's standing there. But there's somebody who is sitting in his office, who is in the marketplace, who is your neighbor, who is harboring a suicidal idea, doesn't have a plan, or who is wishing to die for reasons of frustration. It is within those group of people that those who will eventually engage in a suicidal act are extracted from. So many a times what we talk about is that those that require the biggest form of intervention, unfortunately, which is not an hospital-based intervention, but a community-based intervention, are those in those lower spectrum. Because if you see anybody who have engaged in a suicidal act, I can assure you that for several weeks or several months, that person may have moved from just having a wish to die to having a suicidal idea without planning, to having a plan and to executing it. So intervention is actually to break that pathway. But unfortunately, in practice, what we see, like I said often, are those who are brought to the hospital having completed a suicidal act, from which you are now invited to come and talk to the person. So you can only prevent a recurrence. You have not prevented the act from happening in the first place. So that's why one of the advocacy that we talk about is that there should be a comprehensive mental health system incorporated into primary health care level, where some of these issues can be identified before they escalate. Okay,
I mean, we'll talk about those measures, but when you talk about intervention, I mean, if you want to intervene or help at the community level, as you have said, you need to know how to even recognize that, this person is at this point on the spectrum, this person is contemplating, this person has a plan, so how do you really recognize what are the signs and symptoms? Because I hear depression, unhappiness, and then you hear there's even a difference between depression and unhappiness. Some other things are responsible. How do you recognize that this person has that tendency?
So, like I said earlier, human health is not something that occurs in isolation. So, when you go to churches, you go to mosque, you go to community program, you go to primary health centers, these are places where people congregate, where people talk about things that is happening to them. So, if you are able to integrate a system within some of these structures where people can assess for depression. I'll give you one example of one of the programs that we carried out in my own department, in which we try to integrate depression screening into... Okay.
You've talked about depression now. What stage is depression in the spectrum?
So depression is not on the spectrum. Depression just happened to be a risk factor for being on that spectrum in the first instance.
So at what point does the spectrum begin?
So like I said, the spectrum begins from having an ordinary wish to die or getting tired of life. Now, being tired of life...
How do you get... Just one moment. Because I'm trying to... This kind of education doesn't happen. Perhaps that is the reason that the figures rise, and as Jamelin said, we just gloss over them because we don't know that they are actually, serious issues. So there is a leading to the spectrum, right?
Yes.
Okay. What are the things that leads to that spectrum?
So, like I said, people experience different issues in life. Life experiences. You are experiencing a traumatic event. You are experiencing, and again, traumatic event can be broadened to include things like as common as not just having enough resources to live your life, not being able to play the role that is expected of you within the society, facing different forms of adversity. We have different level of resilience when it comes to adversity. Some people handle adversities in terms of coping better. Some don't cope as good as others. So those who didn't cope well have a tendency to move into the early phase of depressive symptoms. It is within this early phase of depressive symptoms in some people that we may have some of these. And it's not only just depressive symptoms. If things are happening around, for instance, this whole COVID-19 and the uncertainties around it can bring up anxiety symptoms. And within anxiety symptoms, it can become burdensome enough for you to enter into that spectrum.
Now, you also talked about, we'll take a break shortly, but you also talked about mental health. You said we need a comprehensive mental health kind of program and all of that. It will be good for you to educate us if there is a spectrum on the mental health that usually leads to this spectrum of suicide that you talked about. But we'll take that on when we come from this break. Dr. Atilola, there are so many issues to raise and so little time, but very quickly, talk to us about the mental health state that leads to that spectrum that you talked about. Some have also alluded to the fact that anxiety is a level in that mental health spectrum that leads to this suicide that you're talking about.
Yes, I think a way of clarifying that is to first say that any mental health issue can put you on the suicidal spectrum. And it doesn't even have to be a diagnosable mental health issue like anxiety, depression. It could just be as simple as the fact that you are having relational issue within your family. It could be as simple as the fact that there are some challenges you are facing in your business. Every psychosocial issue that afflicts man can lead to entering into the suicidal. We've heard these statements people make loosely by saying, look, I'm just tired of everything. They are not necessarily depressed or having anxiety disorder, but they are facing a life situation that is exceeding their coping ability. So during that, when a life situation is exceeding your coping ability, you can enter to the suicidal spectrum. And like I said, it can just be as simple as wish to die. But then it can progress, and then before you know it, along that line, there can be a slide into practical suicidal behaviors.
In trying to raise awareness, so that we could all contribute to reducing those numbers. I mean, this scenario you mentioned, we hear it time and again. It could be on the street, at workplace, social gathering, where people just say, oh, I'm just tired of this. And even those who say it don't necessarily at that point in time have any suicidal tendencies. What should we do when we hear people just say that kind of thing?
Well, thankfully, there are things that we have been doing correctly. Like I always tell people that when people face difficulties and they visit their friend, they talk about it. Some people just have a natural ability to talk to people, engage them, encourage them, provide support, call them. In other instances, we talk about people who go to visit their clergy either their pastor or their imam. I will not underrate the amount of psychological support that many of these organizations are providing for people. What we are advocating is that people should be able to recognize the warning signs. When somebody starts talking about death recurrently, you may not want to continue your own lay counseling. That might be the point when you tell somebody that, don't you think you may benefit from some professional help? I've seen instances of people who have actually referred their friends, their families, and even take over the bill of seeing someone because they just convince themselves that this person needs professional help. And when we see those people, we usually are very happy that as at the time when we were seeing them, we didn't see them at that point. They must have faced more difficulties.
There are tons of questions just rushing through my head as I listen to that. But, first, it's just as you have mentioned now. I mean, coming across some literature that tells you to, talk to one another. I think some holy books say confess your faults to one another. It's part of talking and hearing oneself out or each other out. From what you say, I glean that it could contribute to helping. But what do you do? Because given the way society is, if they hear that, well, I want to say a psychiatrist, you know how they will respond to me. So how should we, or what's your advice in terms of what we should be doing about this kind of issue? Because that stigmatization contributes to why people you won't hear anyone say, I think I need to just see a psychiatrist from having this kind of challenge. What should we be doing?
Yes, unfortunately, the practice of psychiatry has faced a lot of stigma, and it is an unfortunate situation in the sense that I can always tell my patient that when you are coming to come and see a psychiatrist, you are coming to come and see a doctor. You must first bear that in mind. The same way that somebody decided to be a cardiologist after becoming a doctor or become a gastroenterologist or something, it's the same way somebody decided to become a psychiatrist. And psychiatric consultations, usually wrongly depicted in the popular media and films, it's not exactly what people have seen. Psychiatric consultation is the same way you will consult with any other doctor. You sit on the other side of the table, you explain what you are going through, questions are asked, and formulations are made, and assistance are rendered. It's just something that simple. However, I believe that the conversation necessarily just have to go on. Because what I mean by conversation going on is that at the community level, we need to continue to demystify mental health services. Mental health constitutes a very significant part of our health. And like I always tell primary health physicians that up to about 20 to 40% of patients that you see in primary health centers actually come with a mental health complaint, except that sometimes it is not recognized. And so this is not a time, we have gone past the time when we are still discussing, oh, I have problem with seeing a psychiatrist, I have problem with seeing a psychologist and stuff like that. We have to get practical in the sense that this is a big issue. And with this COVID-19 era, I can assure you that the volume of mental health problem has actually quadrupled. I run clinics, and I know the number of patients I used to see before and the number of patients that I'm seeing now. So
that's hearing that alone is quite troubling, honestly. And I was going through figures from SERPIN, that's Suicide Research Prevention Initiative, which partners with APN. And it was said that 1/5 of cases that are reported are usually people between 13 and 19 years old. It says that most of the callers that call in are between 20 and 39, basically saying young people are usually very affected. There are a lot of reasons, but I'm just thinking, is social media also maybe one of the risk factors? Is that even remotely involved?
Yes, well, the world is changing. And for every development in the world, it comes with its own mental health implications. The advent of social media has changed the landscape of the way we communicate and the way we reach each other. Before you can be bullied, you have to have physical contact before now. But today, you don't need to have a physical contact. You can be bullied by somebody who is 2,000 kilometers away from you. And also information that you are not, that is not available to you without some form of guidance can be available to you now without any form of guidance. We have also seen instances where people have discussed suicidal behavior in social media, and people have taken a cue from it. But it's not all that, it's not all bad, because we have also seen instances, at least I've experienced that several times, that people have said something on social media that suggested that they may be going through some difficulties, and people have been able to pick the cue and use that medium to refer them. So at least I've seen, in this year alone, I've seen at least 4 or 5 people who were referred based on what they said on social media. So it has its pros and its cons, but certainly there are more cons on that side than the pros.
All right, so as we wind down now, tell us, is this prevalent among people with certain character traits? What would you consider as a low-hanging fruit that we should look out for in our bids to help out?
Well, there's a saying that majority of people who engage in suicidal behavior have told somebody before they do so. So the commonest thing is that we don't take people seriously when they say that. Just this weekend, I had a call from someone who sent a message to someone that, look, I want you to be the last person I will communicate with before I end it all. And I was glad that that person that received the message immediately alerted me. And we reached out to the young lady, and at least we were able to avert that. So take what people say seriously. Of course, there could be red herrings, but then you may not be able to differentiate between a red herring and the reality. So always take it seriously when people talk about how they feel, especially when it has suicidal component. And don't criticize, don't judge, just compassionately talk to them and also guide them to how they may be able to seek mental health services. And I think I may say that maybe everybody could read up about what we call the mental health first aid, because it's something that everybody can understand and know how to do, how to go about it with people that are experiencing mental health problems. You can all be some form of mental health practitioner in that level.
Okay.
Nice one.
Talk to parents for 30 seconds. That Kayode just mentioned, the young people. What should parents look out for? 30 seconds.
For young people?
Yes.
Well, the young age is a very vulnerable age. And I think I will tell parents that just the same way I've talked about to the general public, they need to take whatever their adolescent is saying seriously. Not everything can be explained by, it's just being an adolescent. Sometimes, while adolescence is a very healthy period, but it comes with challenges that may not just be waved aside. So when your adolescent is expressing concerns or is saying things that is concerning to you, it is always appropriate if you try to get that adolescent to see someone. Adolescents talk to external people more than they talk with their own parents, because they sometimes feel that their parents will be judgmental. The kind of thing, I'm actually an adolescent mental health specialist, and the kind of thing that we've heard from adolescents, we know that they won't tell their parents.
All right then. Thank you very much for talking to us this morning, Dr. Olayinka Atilola, Head of Department of Psychiatry, LASCOM and LASUF. Thank you so much for your time and perspectives.
You're welcome.
So one more thing, we'll be back.
Interesting comments there, but so I'm asking, which market? Someone said, give me the address of that market.
So we can all go there.
Yeah, someone said, well, maybe it's a different market. In fact, someone said, the market that we both go to seems to be different. That the same kind of market he mentioned, that market price of rice jumped from 24,000 to 35,000 naira in 1 week.
Wow.
So we have to probe that market.
That's a lot, really.
Yeah, really. It is. It's a lot.
But, well, speaking about, they're all related these days. I mean, commodities, prices of goods in the markets, the economy, they're all just intertwined. And recently, the president, they held this ministerial review, just to assess themselves and see What are they doing? What should we expect from them moving forward? Haven't done that review mechanism, if we could call it that. So, data analyst joins us this morning, Babajide Ogun. So, good morning and thank you for coming on today. So, much as I don't know which market you go to, so could you tell us now, in context of what's playing out, you've been looking into some figures yourselves, so which, I mean, sometimes we see that of the CBN, we see that of the MBS, and then even the former Minister of Agri was talking about how much we're spending on food imports. Look, what figures are you crunching up in all of this, Julie?
The most important thing is the rising prices. You know, 2 centuries ago, French philosopher and writer Joseph Joubert said that it is better to debate a question without settling it than to settle a question without debating it. And so today, I would like to debate a lot of things that are going on. The first is, my debate standpoint and my perspective is that Nigeria is an ant that has the potential to be an elephant. And I'll share 3 reasons why my debate is that, why Nigeria is an ant that has the potential to become an elephant. The first is that within the last 48 hours, we've seen the new debt figures from the Debt Management Office that shows that Nigeria's total debt, which is the federal government, the states, and the Federal Capital Territories, 31 trillion naira Chamberlain. Now, a lot of Nigerians are concerned about Nigeria's debt, and yes, we should be concerned because the debt is rising faster than the revenue. But here's what is more important. 31 billion naira Chamberlain is just $80 billion. $80 billion. If you pick up the balance sheet of Apple, that US company that we all buy their phones, Apple has a liability of $240 billion. In other words, Apple owes 3 times what Nigeria owes. Just like that, just think about that for a minute. One company owes 3 times what the entire country owes. So Nigeria is an ant that has the potential to become an elephant. Now, the second reason is, let's look at our revenue. Last year, the federal government earned only 4.2 trillion naira. 4.2 trillion naira. The federal government of the United States earned in equivalent naira terms 1.2 quadrillion naira. You heard me right. The federal government of the United States earned 1.2 quadrillion naira. Kayode, here's why this is very important. It means that what the United States government earns in 1 day is what the federal government of Nigeria earns in 10 months. Again, Nigeria is an ant that has the potential to become an elephant. And finally, I'd like to talk about why a lot of Nigerians are bothered about what is going on, the stability of the exchange rates. The central bank shows that we have about $33 billion in our foreign reserves. But here's the facts. The fact shows that if you look at the balance sheet of Amazon, that company, that's one company in the United States where a lot of Nigerians buy things from. Amazon has a cash balance of over $36 billion. You heard me right. You heard me right. In other words, that company in the US, Amazon, has more cash balance than the central bank and indeed all of Nigeria has in its external reserves. And so the conclusion is, yes, while Nigeria has that potential, yes, the giant of Africa, the moment and what we see today is Nigeria, if we look at it from that right perspective, is an ant, but it has the potential to become an elephant.
Well, you know, at the moment, we're grappling with so many things, you know. One of that happens to be the prices, different prices, that of the fuel price. They've looked at it and they keep doing some comparative analysis from where they're coming from, where they are, and where are they likely to find themselves in a couple of years or many years to come if we're to move from being an ant to an elephant. So how do we deal, or what did you find about that comparison that they're doing about the fuel price?
So what we've seen is we've seen a lot of people discuss the petrol price just from what has happened within the last 6 years. But the proper way to do it is to look at what has happened in the Fourth Republic since we started democracy in 1999. And if you take a close look at that, if you look at that information that looks at the history and the movement of our petrol price since 1999, here's what you'll find. Every Nigerian president that has spent at least 4 years has battled with this problem. So when we started democracy, May 29, 1999, fuel was sold for 20 naira. By the time President Obasanjo left, it had moved from 20 naira to 75 naira. President Umaru Yar'Adua is the only president that attempted or that believed that petrol should be sold a bit better, and that was because Nigeria was earning a bit more. So we saw that fuel moved from 75 naira to 65 naira. But the evidence shows that if he had stayed for 4 years or 8 years, he will have understood the problem better. Under President Jonathan, we've seen the price change, moved from 65 to 87 with a lot of volatilities in between. And right now, we've seen that price move from what it started as at May 29, 2015, 87 naira, to where we are now of above 150 naira. Here's what it all means. It means that the petrol price is not just a Buhari problem. It has been a problem for every Nigerian president. And so, yes, we are now moving and taking that bolder and perhaps the right move by making sure that we totally take our hands off the subsidy. Here's why this is important. People have said, yes, the crude oil prices have dropped, yet the naira price of petrol is rising. So here's the right answer, Chamberlain. What is happening is whenever they talk about, you hear that discussion of crude oil prices, crude oil is always priced in dollars. For you hear $40 per barrel, $38 per barrel, $54 per barrel. Nobody prices crude oil in naira. It is the global and world accepted benchmark. So here's what it means. Even though crude oil price drops, if the exchange rate, if the naira weakens, it means that petrol will be sold for a higher price, even though there's a drop in the per barrel cost of crude oil. And that is the challenge every Nigerian president is being faced with. It is that the naira has been getting weaker since 1999, and the economy hasn't been as productive as it should be. And that is why each president has tried to remove the amount that is going into a lot of wasteful spending going into subsidy and trying to take more money into some other productive sectors.
And we know that this usually is connected with revenue. Yes, globally, COVID-19 hit a lot of countries, but there are those who believe here that we could actually earn a lot more, even though today they're reporting that the government says now, having removed the subsidy, will earn 1 trillion naira annually. But many think that it could be a little more, so some disagree with that. What figures did you find?
Now, the fact shows that, Chamberlain, that even if the government wanted to continue paying the subsidy, the evidence shows that we no longer have the money to pay the subsidy. What do I mean? Let's take a look at that information that reveals how much the federal government earned in the first quarter of this year. And from that evidence, it tells us that within the first 90 days of 2020, the federal government earned 865 billion naira. You heard me right, 865 billion naira came into the federal government's pocket. But here's the bigger challenge. And if you look at that information, so the bigger challenge is not just the revenue, it is how much you're spending on interest payments. And the evidence shows that 85% of the earnings that the federal government earns, the 85% of the federal government's revenue goes to pay interest on domestic debt, over 600 billion naira, and interest on foreign debt. And so the conclusion is the government really, if it were to make a good decision, the government had to stop paying the subsidy. Because at the moment, 85% of Nigeria's federal government's earnings goes to paying domestic and foreign debt. And if you include how much money goes into paying salaries, overheads, you then realize that, and the right question is subsidy the most effective use of the federal government's money?
Okay, now here's this part. We'll need a lot of help here now, because, I mean, now that all of these resources were challenged by resources, what we spend money on may be reviewed. So I don't know if Ayo and Kaide have been going to the supermarket previously. we may need to go to another kind of market such that the resources we have can be evenly spread. So tell us, what have we been spending money on? Perhaps it could help us in what should we spend money on in the future.
So recently, that information, the National Bureau of Statistics did some research on how individuals like Ayo and Kayode spend their money. And the evidence shows that the number one thing Nigerians spend their money on isn't transport. Transport is important. Transport takes 6% of Nigeria's, of people's spending. But the first thing is food. More than half of people's daily spending goes to food. And we're able to see that while what is going to happen now is the cost of transportation is expected to go up a bit, will Nigerians spend more money on food? Perhaps no. What we'll see is the other items that Nigerians spend money on. For instance, we most likely will see Nigerians reducing their spending on household goods. At the moment, household good accounts for about 3% of what Nigerians spend money on. So we might see Nigerians spending a little less on household goods. We might see Nigerians spending a little less on their entertainment spending. Nigerians spend approximately 1% of their daily spending on entertainment. So that is likely going to be the case. It is not likely that Nigerians will spend less money on food because the cost of food is rising, but we might see some Nigerians spending less money on other items.
Does that suggest that any of the MDAs we have that are best performing or worst performing, are those the ones in the food sector? Which of them do?
So we've seen the ministerial retreat, and I'm sure the president and the vice president have sent a clear message to all the ministers. But here's perhaps the best way to look at how the ministries have performed. We understand that there are 46 economic sectors in Nigeria, and the evidence we have today shows that since the second quarter of this year, if you look at that real GDP figure, the evidence shows that only 10 sectors out of Nigeria's 46 sectors have experienced real growth. Only 10 out of 46. So we have 10 sectors that have experienced real growth since the second quarter of 2015, and we have 36 sectors that have declined in the second quarter of 2020 relative to second quarter of 2015. So what sectors are we seeing some level of good performance? We're seeing growth in the broadcasting sector that we're involved in. We are seeing growth in the crop sector. We're seeing growth in the livestock sector. We're seeing some growth in the forestry sector as well. And we're seeing some growth in the telecommunications sector. The sector that has seen the highest decline is the oil refining sector, and that offers the Nigerian government a lot of revenue. So going forward, the government needs to focus on not just these 10 sectors that are growing, but these 36 sectors that have been declining since relative to 2015.
With these figures, Jide, definitely, maybe you are calling for another ministerial review. But we want to thank you very much, Baba Jide Ogunsanwo, Channels TV.
And don't forget, Nigeria is an ant that has the potential to become an elephant.
Doesn't sound...
There you go. That is the show today. So on behalf of Ayo Makinde, Kaide Okikelu, and me, Chamberlain, so have a good weekend.